Have you ever paused to consider what it would look like to have Jesus walk the earth in the 21st century instead of the first? Would he use to his full advantage today's technology? Would he be using TikTok, walk around with an iPhone, still maintain his Facebook account to reach the older generation, possibly have a spot on TV whereby he reached a larger audience? What would it look like? To some degree, it's of course a moot point, only something to muse about because we already know that Jesus came 2,000 years ago at just the right time. We find this in Romans 5, very clearly laid out for us. His timing was flawless then, and his timing is every bit as flawless now, which means he has us here for such a time as this. Jesus said and did much in his short time on earth, so much so that as John concludes his gospel, he says, Jesus did many other things. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that even the whole world would not have room for the books that would be written. It can at times seem overwhelming trying to even align ourselves personally with all that Jesus taught. The challenge multiplies itself when we are diligent about aligning our business principles and practices with his teachings as well. In the next few moments, I want to highlight just two of Jesus' statements as we consider this intersection of technology, faith, and business. The first is a bit provocative, challenging, and if I'm honest, mildly insulting. The second stirs up feelings of exhilaration and possibility. When properly understood, I believe both statements can help us navigate this incredible journey that we're on. The first is found in the Gospel of Luke. It's this statement that's provocative, challenging, and as I said a moment ago, mildly insulting. In Luke 16, Jesus tells a parable about a manager who is about to lose his job. He goes into what we'll call self-preservation mode because he valued the life he had built and he wanted the security even when he was fired. Despite the dishonest manner by which he went about securing his future, the man he worked for actually commended him for being so slick. It's immediately after this that Jesus says, the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than are the people of the light. Ouch! The unbelieving world does a better job in dealing with the people and things of this world than believers do? If you're not mildly insulted, I think you should be. But don't lose heart because Jesus doesn't leave us without a solution. He follows up by saying, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves so that when it, talking about the worldly wealth, is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Three things just leap off the page. Number one, we are to use worldly wealth. We're challenged to use worldly wealth. The second thing is that worldly wealth doesn't last. And then finally, eternity is what matters the most. Those who have absolutely no faith bases use wealth. And we're going to just, instead of saying wealth, we're going to say resources. Those with no faith bases use resources to advance a life that we all understand will eventually come to an end. How much more should those of faith use wealth to make not only a difference on this earth, but an eternal difference as well? Technology, faith, and business intertwine and intersect perfectly through the lens of an eternal perspective. Every Christian business should operate with this eternal perspective. Why? Because the next thing Jesus said, and this is Luke 16, 10 through 11, he says, whoever can be trusted with very little, and that would be the worldly resources, can also be trusted with much, and that would be eternal resources. But whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, Jesus says, who will trust you with the true riches? It's no secret that the best businessmen and women in the world leverage every available resource to advance themselves and their business ventures. I believe Jesus is flat up challenging Christian business women and men to use every available resource with a different perspective and a different agenda. Knowing that everything on this earth is temporary, use technology, use every available resource to make an eternal difference. And it's not as if this is a principle only taught here. In Matthew 6, Jesus says, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, In 1 Timothy 6, we read that we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can take nothing out of it. In 2 Corinthians 9, we're told that if we sow sparingly, we will reap sparingly. And again in Luke 6, with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So here's the reality. What's next? And I'm talking about eternity. It's coming. What's here won't last. Knowing that, we should use every available resource for a greater purpose than the rest of the world. If we're not leveraging for eternity, we're settling for something that is less than the high calling God has given us. I leave you with the second statement of Jesus I mentioned earlier. This is the one that's filled with exhilaration and possibility. In Revelation 3, we find a letter written to the church at Philadelphia. In it, Jesus says, what he, and talking about himself, what he opens, no one can shut. And what he shuts, no one can open. And then he says, see, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. If God has placed before you an open door of opportunity, an open door with your business, walk through it with confidence, using worldly resources for an eternal good.